Hello and welcome to Tinkercad. We're going to be modelling the Pobble Bow carrier bag reuse container, and in this lesson we'll begin by creating a half sphere with a keyring attachment. After completing this lesson you'll be able to use Tinkercad to create a half sphere using solids and holes, use Tinkercad shapes to create a keyring holder, and use Tinkercad to align parts. In the Shapes panel, grab a half sphere and drag it onto the work plane, like this. To begin modelling, we need to change the size of the half sphere. We can do this by clicking and dragging the form to the size that we require, or we can enter the dimensions directly. Let's click the lower left square, then enter the dimensions directly. Let's select and enter 120mm for the length, then tab on the keyboard and enter 70mm for the width, then press return. And let's select the square to change the height also, from 10mm to 25mm. Now let's click and drag our edited half sphere form to move it to the centre of the work plane. Next we'll create the keyring holder for our Pobble Bow. So let's click and drag a torus from the Shapes panel and place it on the work plane near the half cylinder. We'll need to edit the dimensions of the torus, and we can do this by dragging or entering the values directly. Enter 15mm for the length, 15mm for the width, and 6mm for the height. We're building our product in two halves, which we'll need to hollow out, and then we'll 3D print them. Click and drag a box hole from the Shapes panel and place it on the work plane near the keyring holder. We'll use this to remove the lower half of the keyring holder. Now use the View tools to switch to an orthographic view. Then use the View cube to click for a front view. This will make it easier to change the height of our box hole in order to make the cut on the keyring holder. We want to change the height of the box hole from its 20mm default to 3mm, and we can do this by either dragging it or entering the measurement directly. And we can use the View cube again to click for a top view. With a top view we can click and drag the box hole over the keyring holder so that when we do make the cut it cuts half of the entire keyring holder. To make the cut we're going to select both the keyring holder and the box hole. In the sub nav bar we click the Align tool, then click the dots to align centre length and width. Again we can use the View cube to click for a front view. Then in the sub nav bar click Group, and this removes the lower half of the keyring holder. Now all we need to do is click the arrow and drag the remaining upper half of the keyring holder down -3mm to be flush with the work plane. Then use the View tools to switch back to a perspective view. We're now going to hollow the Pobble part and group it with the keyring holder. After completing this lesson you'll be able to use Tinkercad to create a second half sphere and specify its dimensions, use Tinkercad to create a hole and hollow the first sphere, and use Tinkercad to align and group the parts. In order for our Pobble Bow to be a container, we need to hollow out the part that we've just created. And to do this, we're going to create a second half sphere with slightly smaller dimensions, which we'll use to hollow out our Pobble part. So let's click and drag another half sphere from the Shapes panel and place it on the work plane just above the first part that we've just created. Let's alter its dimensions to 118mm in length, 68mm in width, and 23mm in height. And then in the inspector let's select Hole and change the shape from a solid to a hole. Now we can select both parts, and in the sub nav bar we can click Align. Click the black dots to align to centre both length and width, and then in the sub nav bar again click Group. This removes the material that we no longer want. Now we can use the View cube or the Orbit tools to survey the part and confirm that the material has been successfully removed. With the material removed, we now need to align and group the keyring holder with the hollowed Pobble part. Select both the Pobble part and the keyring holder, and then in the sub nav bar click Align. Click the black dots to align to centre by width, and then click and drag the keyring holder to merge with the hollowed Pobble part. This is easier when using a top view, so in the View cube click Top. Now click and drag the part. You may wish to hold Shift on your keyboard so the keyring holder part snaps to a horizontal line. Now select all the parts and click Group. And that's the first half of our Pobble bow complete. In the next demonstration tutorial, we'll create the other half of the Pobble bow and then add some text, a hole, and export the design for 3D printing. In this demonstration tutorial, we're going to create the second half of the Pobble bow. And after completing this lesson, you'll be able to use Tinkercad to create a duplicate of the hollowed cylinder part. So let's begin with a top view of our design. Click Top on the view cube, and then click to select the Pobble part. Then in the subnav bar, click Duplicate. Now hold down the Shift key, click and drag the new part up so that you can see it. So we now have two identical parts, which we can join to make the complete product. But before we do that, let's put a hole in one of the parts. After completing this lesson, you'll be able to create and cut a hole in the Pobble part and use Tinkercad to align and group the parts. So let's begin by dragging a cylinder hole from the Shapes panel and place it on the work plane just to the right of the duplicate part. Now let's resize the cylinder hole, 35mm in length, 35mm in width and 30mm in height. Now click the duplicate part and in the subnav bar click Ungroup. Select both the cylinder hole and the duplicate Pobble part. Click Align, click Top on the view cube and click the black dot to align the width of the cylinder hole with the duplicate Pobble part. Using the view tools, switch to an orthographic view. This will make it easier to position the cylinder hole. Now you can click and drag the cylinder hole and position it wherever you want. I'm going to center mine. Now select all of the duplicate Pobble parts, including the cylinder hole. Then in the subnav bar, click Group. This will group the parts and also cut the hole. In Tinkercad, we can also add text to a part. So let's add text to the other half of the Pobble bow. After completing this lesson, you'll be able to position and add text to the Pobble part using Tinkercad. Use the view tools to click for a home view. In the Shapes panel, click Basic Shapes and select Community Shape Generators. Shape generators are JavaScript programs that generate 3D geometry based on a set of visual inputs provided by a user. So you can generate your own shapes from 2D curves that are extruded, or by directly building a mesh. To add our text to the Pobble bow, we're going to use a shape generator provided by a Tinkercad user and shared with the community. Scroll through the shape generators, locate a shape generator called Script. Now click and drag the Script shape generator onto the work plane. Use the view cube to select a top view, and then in the text inspector, change the font from Script to Stencil. Select the default text and change it by typing bow or another word of your choosing, and also change the height to 30. Now click and drag the text and position the text wherever you want it. You can do this by dragging the text, or you can use the align tools, like I'm doing here. I'm going to align the text to the center width. Once you're happy with the position of the text, use the inspector to change its status to a hole in order to cut through the Pobble part. Then select all the component parts and click Group. This will also cut the text from the Pobble part. So that's our Pobble bow design complete. All that remains for us to do now is lock the parts for further editing and export the file for 3D printing. After completing this lesson, you'll be able to lock both Pobble parts to prevent further editing. To lock the parts, select the grouped part and in the inspector, click the lock icon. Do this for both parts. If you need to do further editing on them, don't worry because we can unlock these again. Simply click the part, then click the lock icon to unlock them. Now we can export the design for 3D printing. After completing our final Tinkercad lesson, you'll be able to create and download an STL file for 3D printing. To create and download an STL file for 3D printing, click to select the part, and in the sub-nav bar, click Export. Select to include the selected shape, then select the format STL. This will automatically save out the file to a specified location according to your browser settings. And you can repeat this process for the other part. In Tinkercad, there are a number of ways that you can share your work. In the sub-nav bar, click Share. You can share a snapshot of your design via social media or via download. You can send it to Thingiverse or My Mini Factory, and you can also share a link over instant messaging or by email. If you click to invite people and then click to generate a new link, you can share this new link with anyone that you wish. And this completes the Tinkercad demonstration tutorials for the Pobble Bow carrier bag reuse container. Don't forget that our Fusion demonstration tutorials will show you how to import the Tinkercad STL file into Fusion, where you'll be able to use Fusion's powerful parametric and freeform modelling tools, as well as its photorealistic rendering workspace to refine and manufacture the design.